I'm just helping you invest in your future, my friend.
It sounds like a get-rich-quick scheme.
Yes, thank you. You will get rich quick. We all will.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Monday evening live stream, coming live from basically the West Coast. You're in Alberta, right?
Yeah, all the way from
Love it.
Canada in the
Yeah.
house.
Thank you for being here. We can just go ahead and jump right in while people kind of filter in. If we want to start by you introducing yourself to the audience, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Cathy Rashidian. I feel like I'm like sitting on a confessional.
Yeah.
I've been a coach since 2018. No, seriously though, I am an executive coach. I specialize in ADHD in the workplace. Yes, I am an ADHD coach, but we'll get to it. We'll get to the reasons why I'm actually proud of what I do, and how I got to where I got to. I came on the show with Danielle. Basically, I've been following her work for months and months now, and I love everything she has to say about the coaching industry and the snake oil that some of, I don't even want to call them peers, some of the coaches that sell. So for us, to me, it was important that I bring in the truth side of things, the legitimate side of things that coaching can bring. And as I said, my specialty, my credentialing is all around ADHD in the workplace, but also as a coaching executive with a bunch of acronyms and credentialing behind my name. I also want to talk about that, of what it takes to be a credentialed, experienced coach versus overnight certification. Hi, I got diagnosed with depression and now I'm a depression coach. With all due respect, with, that kind of stuff. So I could go on, but Danielle, over to you. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me on your show.
we will for sure get into that. It's funny. I was just like scrolling TikTok earlier today and a video came up of, I guess there's a gentleman who's like a psychiatrist and he calls out a lot of like similar to this, like problematic stuff happening in like the mental health coaching space. Anyway, he was making a point of this one individual who I guess was like an author or something. And then one day got diagnosed with ADHD. And literally the day after his diagnosis, became an ADHD coach, started making TikToks about it, and has since like gained some notoriety on TikTok. So he has like 150,000 followers now or something. And the gentleman who was making the video was making the point of like, he literally got diagnosed like yesterday and now he's this expert in ADHD. So obviously there's a big conversation to be had there. And that kind of ties into my recent video that came out a couple days ago. For those of you that haven't seen it yet, this whole idea of like anyone on the internet can be an expert in anything. So I'm excited to kind of chat about that because I think that's an important conversation, and one that comes up a lot in the comments is like, okay, well, anyone on the internet can be an expert. So what qualifies people as an expert, and what allows people
Yeah.
to be able to become a coach or share advice or that kind of thing. So I'm excited to get into the conversation today for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. Welcome everyone. Monica, hello. We have Lisa. Jolene is here. Amanda. That's great. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to give the stream a thumbs up if you haven't already. I've linked Cathy's channel in the chat as well. So if you want to head over to her channel, thumbs up the stream there as well. I would appreciate that. Yes, exactly, Monica. So Monica says here, it's okay to talk about your experiences, but it's different to pretend to be an expert in anything. Absolutely. I think there's so much value in, again, pretty much anything in life to share what your experience was, how maybe coping mechanisms of like a certain experience you had that you survived. But then it really depends on how you're positioning yourself when you're presenting that information, I think. And that's
Yeah.
something that I'm excited to get into later.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So I do just want to say before we get into our conversation here that if anyone has specific questions that you want to ask Cathy throughout the stream, you can feel free to put those in the chat and we'll get to them. I also, of course, for those of you that regularly watch my channel, I am pretty neurotic, so I have an entire list of things that we're going to talk about today that we will
Love it. Love
slowly make our
it.
way through. So I'm excited to chat. Let's go ahead. Let's jump right in. So I know that you already introduced yourself. I would love to hear a little bit more specifically about your journey navigating being diagnosed with ADHD, assuming that you have ADHD. I mean,
Yep, yep. Swim away. I'll let
um,
you know.
and kind of that transition of like your diagnosis and then getting into ADHD coaching specifically. What was that journey like for you?
Okay. I can give you my origin story that's from the wound, or I can speak from the scar. So let me get in there and give you some coaching language. Did you like that one?
I
But
love
no,
it.
truly, there are two different ways we could talk about this, right? Is I can go into the vulnerability side, the deeper, like, oh, this happened and that happened, but reality. 20 years in tech, working in big enterprises in Canada, corporate Canada, I was rocking it in the digital realm. And life was great. Everything was going well. And then at the age of 40, I had my baby girl, miracle baby. And then life crashed and nothing was happening. I went from functional, highly functional, to complete dysfunction of not being able to do anything. And for me, that's where I was like, ooh, something is off. And that something was off was me going to the doctor, constantly visiting her, going, what's going on? And my doctor hinting at, well, this does sound like you've always lived with ADHD, you just didn't know it. And I'm like, get out of here. ADHD is for boys, the whole stigma thing. And she's like, no, it's a thing. And it's just you've been at the right place at the right time, doing the right things, and you just cope through it. So when I did the assessment that my family doctor gave me, I looked at the questionnaire and it made sense. My whole life made sense, Danielle. And at that point, there was a crossroads of, wow, okay, if this is how my brain operates, how do I manage my 9 to 5 while I'm being a mom and also trying to live my dreams and doing other things? So to me, that crossroads was a big one, and it was a lot of talking it out with my doctor, who's amazing. I have this amazing family doctor. I wish her on the kind of doctor that she is to anybody. And so with that, it was going into, well, if this is the case, how do I want to navigate my career in a different way? I had always wanted to create my own digital agency because I was doing it. Every time I'd watch the Lewis Howes and all of them, I'm like, oh God, look at what they're pitching. Like this is, and also in the enterprise world, I had done it at large scale of digital marketing, so I knew I could have done it. But for me, that idea of starting up my own business was scary as f. So I went back into the wheelhouse of what are my strengths. In the past, I had worked with coaches. I had worked with corporate coaches, with executive coaches that truly know how to work with you to bring out the best in you. And one of my strengths was leadership. So I took that and I'm like, well, what's out there around coaching? How can I do that? And then I found the first coach training institute that I went to. 1 whole year and a half of training, extensive training, a lot of money, but it was deep work. And I got this new appreciation of what it's like to be a coach and what it's like to also be mentored by a coach and have somebody listen to your coaching calls, give you evaluation, give you ideas of what you can do, what you don't do, all of that good stuff. Then I got introduced to ICF, International Coaching Federation. Through that, I learned that, wow, in this industry, there is actually, it's, I want to say a governing body, but in a soft way because we're coaches, we're not therapists, we don't have licenses, but also we do have International Coach Federation that can give us some of the guidelines and standards. I latched onto that. I love when I read the ICF's ethics, code of standards. There's some really good stuff in there that really sets us apart from those coaches that are overnight coaches without being attached to a governing body. So, for example, today, if I do something wrong with a client, they can actually go and file a complaint about me to International Coach Federation that Cathy did this, and this is because of my credentialing. There's somewhere they can go complain. Try doing that with a coach that's out in the world that isn't attached to any governing body. So the more I went into coaching, Danielle, and sorry, long story short, is the more I was intrigued by the brain and how our brain works and how our wiring works and how my ADHD works. Then came the ADD Coach Academy, where I went for another round of 2 years of extensive coach training. So I keep saying extensive, and it was extensive because, again, hours and hours of training. We had within our class, I think we had therapists, we had psychologists that were coming in to hone in on the ADHD brain wiring. And every time, hands down, they will always say, this is more than what I got in university on the ADHD topic per se, right? So for me, that felt good that also I'm part of an organization that has the gold standard of ADHD training that I'm a part of. And then I went and applied to become part of PAC, which I always forget their acronym. Give me 1 second, I got to bring it up. Professional Association for ADHD Coaches. So with PAC also, they're like the sister association to ICF. So any coaches that get ADHD coach training also can become a PAC credentialed coach, which again, you need to get sponsors. You need to get up 3 coaches at least to say, yes, Cathy is legitimately can do this work. They listen to your calls. So you see, there's rigorous steps to go through. And what I want to say in all of that is there's a difference between a coach that's certified, that went through some sort of a 3 months, 6 months, one weekend certification program versus one that becomes credentialed. Because with the credentialing, there's a set of boundaries that they need to abide by. That's my story in a jam. I hope that made sense. I do talk fast, so.
No, I think that was great. And I think you bring up an important point when you're talking about the ICF, because this is something I've mentioned on the channel a few times. Like the ICF efforts to be this like governing body, but at the end of the day, there's no like real enforcement. So someone files a complaint against you, maybe you lose your ICF credentialing, you can still operate as a coach, right? And so I think that ultimately the problem that in my opinion we see with the coaching industry is that because of that like lack of repercussions almost, the
Mm,
onus falls on you as the coach to know what your boundaries are and to
yes.
operate ethically within those boundaries. So I would be curious, and I'm sure that people here in the chat would want to know as well, how you as a coach can work to make sure that you are staying within those boundaries, those guidelines. Because I know like Heather here in the chat is saying, I had access to a coach at my workplace and it was super valuable. There is value in coaching. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of the times people can come across my content and think that I'm just like this internet hater troll who thinks all coaches need to burn. No, if we can find a way to understand what our boundaries are and operate within those boundaries, I think that there's power in coaching and having a coaching relationship. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective as someone who's actively operating within that industry, how
Hmm.
you can make sure that you can uphold those boundaries and sort of operate within your scope.
Great question. I think it does come down to our own personal values and integrity. And for me, my highest value, any assessment I do, is authenticity and integrity. And for me, that's like really up there. Even with the people that I work with, the collaborations that I do, if I feel like they're a little bit on the like iffy side, I pull out of the collaboration. So I think it's a personal thing that if I'm being true to myself, to my clients, for example, if I say more no's, I'll tell you that this is how I keep up with that. I say more no's than yeses to my discovery calls. Most of the time, the ones that come through maybe dealing with another mental diagnosis or there's something else. There could be bipolar, there could be an eating disorder. It's especially in my field, it does get into mental health stuff, right? So for me, if I get that sense of, wow, I don't think this is coaching right now. I think this is about getting the right help at the right time with the right professionally trained person. This would be beneficial to you before you come to coaching. Substance use, that one is a common one within our community. And I'm always, intriguing, asking about that. What's going on here? What's going on here? And I'm pretty straightforward and honest. And I give that to them. When you're ready for a coach, then you can come back. But for now, this sounds like therapy work, which I don't have training on. And I wouldn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So for me, that's how I keep it real with what's within my boundary of training and then what's out of scope. So for those that say trauma-informed coaches, with all due respect, no. Unless you had therapy background and training, that stuff is so big and so wide and so deep, and it can cause some damage if you push the wrong buttons, if the person is not ready. So all of those, I take all of that into consideration.
Yeah,
I hope
so
that
like
answers your question.
an
'Cause it
immense
is a
level of
personal thing.
exactly. It's like an immense level of self-awareness is needed in order to know where to kind of draw those lines. Because I know the trauma-informed piece you just brought up is something that I'm very sensitive to
Mhm.
in that, like, when I was a yoga teacher, I was a trauma-informed yoga teacher, right?
That's right.
Trauma-informed does not enable me to now help people work through their trauma, and there seems to be this misunderstanding in a multitude of industries where people don't get that. They think, "Oh, I took this, 2-day trauma-informed certification. Now I can help people work through their trauma." And I'm just like, "Red flags, buzzers going off. No, 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 no. These people need to be working with a therapist, a psychiatrist, someone who's actually capable of handling that." So,
That's
just
right.
as an aside, but,
Yeah, yeah.
that's one that I talk about a lot here on the channel, so I appreciate you for bringing that up.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd be curious to hear, what a, like, typical client looks like for you. Like, what kind of people you're working with, or is it more
Yeah.
like organizations
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah. It's that's a for me, it's important to identify, and I think from the get-go, and I think this is the marketing side of me that comes through, is to really make sure I know the ideal client that could be a good match with me and my style of coaching and my style of just my personality even, right? um, Ideally, I do work with executives in the workplace that are looking to sharpen their toolkit on communication, work styles, influencing leadership, work management, all of that stuff. So I'm very specific to that audience. I get a mom who says, I'm a mom of three, I'm managing my household. I like your style. I want you to coach me. No, I'm not your coach. And truly, I mean that. There's a reason for that. And I love how you say, when coaches say, oh, you just be 3 steps ahead. I love that whole thing that you go down on because that makes so much sense. Because no, so, and the reason I say that is, yeah, I'm a mom of a 7-year-old too. However, I am in the trenches of motherhood and I'm still going through my stuff. And the last thing I want is another mother to come and be like, okay, let's coach through this together. And some of my peers may say, well, you can distance yourself from that. But this is the part where I say coaching from the wound versus the scar. If I'm doing my own deep work, I don't think personally my boundaries, the way I look at it, I'm not ready to do that with another mom. We may just be best buds and chit chat about it and be peers to each other. Versus in the corporations, I have done enough work in the corporate ladder that I can speak from past experiences. I can also mentor someone who 10 years ago was me in another role. So my ideal is that it's the workplace and really empowering those different brains in the workplace know that they don't have to quit their 9 to 5 to become a digital expert and all of a sudden buy every freaking course out there and try to do something that they weren't meant to do.
exactly, and the example you're providing is one that we see in all subsects of coaching. I'm a business coach, but I've never built a business. I'm coaching you on how to build your business while I'm figuring out how to build my own business. And it's such a dangerous place to be as a service provider,
Hmm.
posing as someone who knows something, whether it's how to manage ADHD, whether it's business, whether it's wellness, whatever. If you don't actually have the skills or the expertise in that thing, and then Kathy, you're paying me to
Hmm.
follow my magical guidance, but I don't even know what I'm teaching you. It's like there's so much harm that can be caused in that space of acting like or only knowing whatever the few steps ahead of whatever the person you're trying to
Hmm.
guide
Hmm.
knows. And I just again, I think it comes back to your initial point of like, it obviously depends on the values of the individual, but from an external perspective, it's so frustrating to watch this happen and just think like,
100%.
how do you not see it? But that being said, me personally, 7 years ago, I was that person. So I get
Same.
how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's just once you're out of it and you see it, you can't unsee it. So now
100%.
I just get,
You know, Danielle, the first year that I started, I said I'm a coach to workplace and entrepreneurs. And my podcast said proudly ADHD and working in business. After 1 year of coaching entrepreneurs, I'm like, nah. There's a different thing about entrepreneurship that I actually think somebody who uh, there's different coaches you need to bring in. You need to bring in a coach for business ops. You need to bring a coach for sales. And this whole one coach will teach you everything is BS. And for me, I'm like, I don't have bandwidth to do all of that. I just want to focus downstream of workplace, and somebody else can do the business coaching for ADHD. And so having that heart to heart with yourself too of where are your capabilities so that you want to be in this for those coaches that truly care and come from a place of empathy, support, we're in it for the long haul. And if you're in it for that short term, short gain, make a few bucks, get out and switch to something else, then, you know, so be it. It's sad, but also at the same time, the other part that you mentioned, my sense of social justice, and this is kind of common in the ADHD community, is it's high. Like when we see someone like, oh my God, how dare you? In the beginning, I was kind of like the coach police on LinkedIn. I would be like, this is harmful. You should not say that to people. Blah, 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 blah. And I started sounding like this bitter, credentialed coach that would go after other coaches. So now I'm a little bit subtler, but I also amplify my message with what is Cathy going to say? How is Cathy going to support this community versus pointing the fingers at the ones that I know are selling snake oil. And eventually those come around. Their clients after one session, after reading the first two chapters of their book, they're like, what the hell is this? This is not what I thought it was. So what goes around does come around. It's just, I guess we all have to go through our own experiences, if you will. You got to
definitely.
experience a couple of bad apples in order to see the one that actually works.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to hear if you can speak to some of that, some of the maybe more problematic behaviors that you've seen. I know before we went live here, we were chatting about how you're pretty active on LinkedIn, and
Mhm.
I'm not sure if anyone in the chat is familiar with what happens on LinkedIn, but I don't spend a lot of time there for a reason. But I'd love to hear um, kind of what you've noticed going on just in the online coaching space in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started this in 2018, I started on Instagram, and at the time, there weren't that many ADHD channels, and there weren't that many ADHD podcasts. So I started Instagram and my own podcast, and off we went. And then I went to LinkedIn because, for whatever, all the reasons that I will not mention, Insta just wasn't my jam. I'm like, I'm done with this. And LinkedIn, because my audience is there. They're, professional people. They're looking at career advice. They're looking for career growth, blah, blah, blah. So I went in there, and for me, what I found is the type of posts that I would see that let me collect my thoughts here because I'm the visual of all the posts that irk me are coming up all of a sudden.
Yeah. Pop, 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 pop.
Yeah, there's one side of it of I was getting bombarded with, do you want to grow your coaching business? We can give you 20 leads a month. I don't need freaking 20 leads a month. I can only handle so many calls a day. What makes you think that I can coach 10 clients a day? I don't want to coach 10
Exactly. I get
clients a
those
day.
emails all the time. What would
Yeah,
you do
so
with 50 leads in your business? Nothing because I don't want
yeah.
them.
Right, or the assumption that I'm not making enough money. Like, how do you know? I'm good with what I'm making. I don't need your help. Did you look at my CV? I actually have a background in this
Yeah.
kind of work. So I don't need your help. But then there was the other coaches that were kind of manipulating this group, if you will. So there's the mental health side of LinkedIn of people. Either it becomes an echo chamber. They read something by, and I'm looking at my books, Russell Barkley or Ned Hallowell, and all of a sudden it gets like retweeted or recreated. It's and without even giving credit to the expert that truly wrote about this, like, has done extensive research. All of a sudden it becomes their language. It's like, no, actually Barkley said that. Wait, Dr. Hallowell said that, not you. So there was a little bit of a misrepresentation of content or sources. Or they say X amount of people with this do this. Where's your source? Where did you get this information from? So that I would see a lot of generalization. And to this day, I still see quite a bit of everybody with ADHD loses their keys. No. Everybody with ADHD is late. No, that's not true. I'm actually always early. Just because it just my brain works. So this generalization that I would see in the community would irk me. Or empty promises. Join my this and this and I will make it go away. Or you will never burn out again. So these promises that I'm pretty sure if a therapist saw it, they'd be like, what are you people doing over there in coaching? So it misrepresented some of us that are truly like have gone through the rigor, have gone through the education to be like, well, actually, no, that's not the case. So false information, false promises, we see a lot of that. Misinformation, or the whole speaking from their wound of this trend of get into your vulnerability. Say that, like, no, please. I don't want to hear another, with all due respect, and I sound a little bitter with that. Help me out. But it's like, right, it's constantly like woes me. That no,
And like
it's
trauma dumping. I don't know. On the part of the
yes,
internet
thank
I hang
you.
out on, everyone's like, I want attention. So let me tell you about the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me.
With a selfie picture to grab the algorithm. I don't
But I
need
can
the
also help you
selfie.
if you've been through it too.
That I was in it a week ago. Now I'm out of it. Well, how do I know you're not going to be in it again next week? Like, what's going on here? So the vulnerability overshare is definitely a thing. And then where you look at some of my other peers that have been around for a while, therapists turned coaches. Those are my favorite peeps because they know the blend of the two and they bring the two together really nicely. For us, it's more about, did you know that if you work with a coach, X, Y, and Z can happen? And we're usually giving an invitation. It's not a hard sale. It's not a you got to sign up by today or my last spot is full. Like, ew.
The
The
full
whole last spot,
scarcity.
I only have two more spots left. Like, no.
Yeah.
There's
Unless you legitimately only have 2 more spots left.
but it's
Um,
overused. Like these bro marketing tactics,
100%.
Danielle, is just, I think by now, I like to think, I hope that our audience is getting used to this scammy language, that they're seeing it. Like, oh, there it is again. There it is again.
Exactly. Yeah, it's and I mean that's kind of the intention with a lot of the content I make is like sometimes yes, I'm just here to snark, but most of the time it's like let's make this an educational opportunity, excuse me, to help people know what those things are to look out for. Like what can I do to protect myself? Because like we've been saying, like a lot of these people will prey on vulnerabilities, traumatic stories, experiences to try and manipulate you into thinking that they have the solution for whatever your problem is. Um, I don't know if you've noticed this either, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Again, obviously, I spend a lot of time on TikTok. So I was on TikTok and I came across an ADHD coach who was in a way like advertising her services, but basically she made this video where she was like in one scene she was pretending to be a therapist and in the other one she was like playing herself, the ADHD coach. And she was giving examples basically as to why like therapy doesn't work if you have ADHD and you should hire a coach instead because therapists will just give you generic advice and therapists will only they don't understand how the ADHD brain works and da 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 da. And to me, it seems like a weird way to get clients by being like, these people suck, but I'm great, so hire me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if you've seen that in the industry or not, but if you have, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it because I just thought it was interesting.
It is, and it's interesting. Like it.
It's like a
Hold.
childish like finger pointing, it seems.
Yes, and I'm trying to collect my thoughts to come across as so that I'm not finger pointing at her. But here's the thing. Is there a time and a place for any sort of a second brain that you can hire to work through some of your stuff? Absolutely. But it's up to us to know when that is, and it should be up to the individual and not poo-poo the, oh, don't work with a therapist. So, are there therapists that truly don't get ADHD brain wiring? Yes.
For sure.
Right? I experienced one and I'm like, dude, we're not having another session again. Right? So there's that because all he was doing was teaching. I'm like, don't teach me. I want to talk stuff out.
Mhm.
So really understanding who your client is, what they're all about. I did an interview with Dr. Russell Barkley, and I did appreciate his candid response that he said, um, talk therapy is not the most effective tool for those with ADHD. Here's why. If we just sit in session every time, just talking about the same thing, rehashing the same thing over and over, and some therapists that have that style, let's just talk about the same shit. Let's see what else, and why did that happen? There's a point where the person goes, dude, I'm done with this now. Can we move forward? Right? So it really depends on the therapist and their style of therapy. And that's where he was going. And then there's a point where you got to move forward. And that's where, with coaching, some of the stuff that we work through is to move forward. Therapists do that too. And I think you should not really undermine the work of therapy because ADHD, any type of neurodivergence, doesn't live by itself. We always say in our industry, ADHD comes with its cousins
Yeah.
or with its siblings. So there's always going to be ADHD and autism, ADHD and OCD, or they're all like a whole gamut of things for one person. So to me, to cut out the therapist angle, dangerous, really dangerous. So that's where for me is no, there is a time and a place for therapists, but also for the person. I've even also had, Danielle, a time where somebody says 6 years of therapy and one session with you, and oh my God. I'm like, but wait. Maybe you needed to go through 6 years of therapy to get to this baseline so one session of coaching can catapult you. Right? So,
Exactly.
so you can't everything at the right place at the right time with the right partnership, I think
And I
is
think
really
that's the
important.
piece. It's like, I think that sometimes people can misconstrue my content into thinking that I'm like only pro therapy.
Yeah,
I don't care if it's a therapist or if it's a coach. My point is more that, like, to make a sweeping generalization, like all therapists are bad, you need to work with a coach instead, seems really unfair because in the opposite, like for me to say the opposite would also be true. Like all coaches are bad, you should only go to therapy. When I don't think either of those statements is correct. It's like finding the right person who can offer you the right tools and the right understanding to help you move forward towards whatever your goal or intention is, right?
100%. I think we shouldn't do life alone. And at any point when you bring on, I call myself a thinking partner, a thought facilitator, where I am supporting you and facilitate your thoughts to get you to talk it out loud and self-correct as you're going through your journey. That's where the magic happens, when you're in partnership with somebody who is trained, who knows how to hold the boundaries, who doesn't advice dump, who doesn't make you feel less than, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so from your perspective as someone who, tries their best to uphold a certain standard, how would you say you differentiate yourself in the market? Because obviously when we're on the internet and we're being inundated with thousands of people cosplaying as experts in stuff they have
Mm.
no business teaching or coaching people on, how do you as someone who is reputable stand out in that space?
I brag about my credentials.
I'm
No.
so smart. I'm the best. Look at me.
No, but honestly, I model it that, by the way, about me, here's on my about me page. One of the things for us to keep our credentials, we continually have to be learning. We continually have to be taking courses so that we can renew our credentialing. So I'm constantly, and it costs a lot of money to even renew it. So I'm constantly keeping up with the education, keeping up with the research. I may even go back and be like, by the way, 2 years ago I said this, new research now says this. I give references to the things that I'm bringing up. I'm just not because Kathy said so. And if I say Kathy said so, I will say this is my humble observation based on what I'm seeing. Don't take it for what it is, the truth. You got to do your own. And I love your approach in the way you do critical thinking, Danielle. I wish more people, you should just do a class on critical thinking. I'm just
Hey
saying.
guys, it's coming next week. It's
Yes.
777, or you can get my payment plan of 444. Uh, that's
Love it.
hilarious.
I love it. But truly, right? And in your last video, you talked about just because you Google it, you see a couple of links, if they're SEO optimized, there it is. And you think you got your answer, but question that. If I say this, is that really the thing to say? So I'm always leaving it open that question what I'm sharing. What if I'm wrong? What if you've seen something different? So I
Honestly, I credit my partner a lot for my critical thinking abilities because there's so many times where I'll be like, "Hey, I read this thing and it said da 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 da," and he'll be like, "Okay, but what about this? And what
oh, I
about this? And what about this?" And then he's googling and he's like, "No, you're wrong." I'm like, "Ah."
that's great. Love
Yeah.
that.
I think
Love
it's
that.
so important though, again, just because we're in this like digital age where anyone can say anything, and if you say it with enough conviction, people will believe you as if it's fact and not
100%.
do that second step of like, that doesn't sound right. They're just like,
100%. And unfortunately, it's also the clout, the numbers, right? Oh, 30,000 followers. Oh my God, wrote a book. This isn't like, no, well, it checks off the branding components, but truly, where did they get? Did they regurgitate another book and just wrote it
yeah,
in a different way and called it their own?
that's
That's
so
the thing.
that's like
You
something
know?
I've seen a lot, especially in the
Yes.
interviews I've done on this channel, is people like taking online courses that were
Mhm.
essentially just like, I think Suzanne that's here in the chat had this experience where she took a course and the entire contents was just someone else's book turned into a course.
Yep. Yep. And shamelessly, right? And it to me that's where it's like, wow. So one of the things that I'm always keeping up with my own integrity is source the truth, source where it came from, source where, so people are tired of me saying this came from the ADD Coach Academy, this came from IPAC, where I got my training from. I'm constantly referring.
Yeah, it's super important though, I think, as a professional, a service provider, to be able to have that to back you up. I think like even from a legal perspective, if I'm working with clients and I'm sharing advice or guidance of any kind or referring them to certain sources, it's important that I've done my research to actually back up what those things are because ultimately you don't want to be held liable for misguiding someone. Well, Cathy told me that this was blah 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 and it turns out the truth is not that. So I think for your own safety in that perspective it's important to maintain that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Suzanne says it was a book that I had read, same chapter headings and everything. The Introvert's Edge was the book. So this person just took the chapters and then laid them out into like a slideshow and called it an online
Shameless.
course.
Shameless. Shameless.
Anything
I
for
mean,
a
there
dollar.
is no lack of information out there, right? Like we are in a world of like now Chat GPT the whole damn thing and it creates a book for you and a course and all of that stuff. But I think it's one of the approaches I've started to take, Danielle, on LinkedIn is I'm tired of giving content because I'm tired of boosting the person's dopamine one at a time, boom, boom, when they're not doing anything with the information. So often now these days, I'm like, come into a workshop. We're coaching this together live in real time. We're going through this instead of me keep giving you content, 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 which all it does is gives you that fake dopamine for that minute, but you're not putting it into action. So I'm also walking that talk of let's do it live so you can experience what it's like to just move one step forward versus consume, 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 which is pretty sad these days.
Yeah, and I think again when we're in this place of just like consistently consuming content, we almost become numb to like
Mhm.
misinformation because we're just like so inundated with everything. If I'm reading it on the internet, it must be true.
Yeah, and the algorithm will keep giving you the same information. So then you're like, confirmation bias, there it is again, and again, and again. So it must be right.
Yeah, that must make it tricky for you. I feel like have you ever had any situations where you're in session with a client and they're like so heavily convicted in something that you're just like, "Mm, you might want to."
Yep. Yep.
So how do you navigate situations like that?
Well, it's, if, with all due respect to all the flat earthers out there, that's my go to example every time. It's not my job to convince you that the earth is round. But what I will do is bring up questions that will ask you to look at it in different perspectives. And if they're still holding on to the earth is flat, then so be it. And I think that's with true coaching is we're not there to switch the belief of somebody and be like, this is wrong and this is right.
Convince.
Right. It's about work through it. What if this person needs to hold on to that for dear life? And actually, by learning that it's round, they may go do something, really catastrophic, like something bad or change something or affect their livelihood. So, again, going back to trauma, PTSD, all of that, you got to play it in a way that supports the person. Are they ready for it? So from time to time, I may give a little bit of a nudge, but it's with consider there's these other things that may be at play too. And then they're like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. That makes a lot more sense. Versus, nope, that's poo poo. You got to go this way.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach to take, and just recognizing that like it's not your responsibility to convince them of something in particular. I guess that kind of leads me into another question about, as a coach, how do you then measure the effectiveness of your coaching?
Great question, which ties into what we just said.
Mhm.
It's about supporting the person. And I'm keep saying the word support, not help, not advice. Is supporting the person to get to a place where they have a few more options. They can tap into their critical thinking. If the person is coming in hot, fight or flight mode, and they're ready to just guard, it's great. Let's get you in a place of a bit of psychological safety so that your brain can calm down, so you can tap into your own inner genius and be like, oh, these are some of the ways. So, with true coaching, what we do is support them to get into calm down the nervous system from fight or flight to possibilities, to wonder, to curiosity. If you did this, what would happen? Oh, I have some options here. It's almost like at the end of the day, my clients say, you're giving me permission to be myself. I'm not giving that permission, by the way. They're giving that permission to themselves. But the journey we took was so that they can come to that understanding on their own and be like, wow, actually, I'm always going to be late and that's just the way it is. But let me put some advocacy around it. Let me say it in a way that doesn't piss people off and I don't feel entitled. I don't sound entitled. But also, I'm okay with even procrastination, let's say, common one. That they'll come away going, it's okay on certain things I'll procrastinate, other things I won't. So they get to stand in their own truth in a way that empowers them versus, oh, I'm broken, I have ADHD, I need to fix it. And I think that goes with any coaching is the coach supports you to get into your own critical thinking, kind of like what your boyfriend was doing with you. What about this
Mhm.
question? What about that question? And then your mind starts to go versus, I'm wrong, look at these people, this is the way it should be. Very rigid, very black or white thinking.
And then that kind of trickles into the rest of your life. So then it, like, at least I know for me now, I'm always like, wait a minute. Is this true or not? It's
100%.
like learning a new skill basically, so that every time moving forward, you're able to better cope the next time you face a similar situation.
It's so interesting. I now work at ADD Coach Academy where I got my training. So I'm a trainer there. I'm a part of the faculty. And by the way, anything I say does not reference ADD Coach Academy, but I think the founders would agree. Um, New coaches come to us with, I want to do this coaching. This is great. And then after a few sessions, wait, I can't give them advice? No. Oh, I can't tell them what to do? No. I can't educate them on ADHD? No. And we give them the right tools and the right way of doing it in a way that empowers the client. And one of the things we always say is, if you're a problem solver, we need you to go to Problem Solver Anonymous and check in, because this is not about problem solving for people. They have the answers in this hustle and bustle. They just haven't gotten to that answer on their own, and we create that container so they can get there. And can you do that through therapy? Absolutely. With coaching, with specific things, you can also get there.
Yeah, I think that's a common misunderstanding of what coaching is,
Mhm.
and even, like, I see coaches who don't understand that, and they're
100%.
like, especially again, I focus a lot on the business coaching space, so I see this a lot where it's like, buy my 5-step formula. Well, you shouldn't be giving anyone a formula. If you're a coach, your job isn't to tell people what to do. It's to help them figure out what to do on their own. But I think this all ties back to our very original statement from 30 minutes ago is like the lack of proper credentialing, the lack of proper education has created this broader industry where anyone can make coaching whatever they want it to be because there's no one to tell them what it is or what it isn't.
100%. 100%. And I think that whole buyer beware is really important. I remember, and I was like, I need to share this with her. So here it is. It just came to me. When I started my business, there was a coach that I liked his content on Instagram. So we did a call. I'm like, I really like your approach, and I'm new to having my own business, but I'm not new to digital marketing. Over his head. And I said, what would it look like to work with you? Well, first I had to work with him for a year. It had to be a 1 year commitment. And
Red flag.
yeah, me like new into this. I just spent like gazillion dollars on training. I have like this much budget left. And it was like $14,000 for the year. And he was like, I have a framework, I have processes, we get you through the whole blah, 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 blah. And in there was like, I'll teach you how to do cold DMs. Another red flag for me. I'm like, don't you dare. And he had a system to sell to me. And here's the part. He didn't hear that I said, I have the experience in the background. Here are the pieces I need. He, whatever, and gave me the whole pitch. And also when I objected on the money front, well, could you borrow it? Could you get a loan? And I'm like he had all the red check
Literally, he must just have this list.
oh my God, like now you want me to go get a loan so I can work with you for a whole year? What if I don't want to be staying in business for a whole year? What if 3 months into it, I'm like, oh, I made the wrong choice. I need to go back to corporate. You know what I mean? So all of those things. And I think with folks, trust your intuition, trust your gut. If you feel like your spidey senses are coming out like something is off here, it is off.
Exactly.
Sorry,
And
I just had to share that story.
no, I think it's super important because that's something that's come up a lot in the interviews that I've done on this channel is this idea of like people being on sales calls already counting themselves out of a program, being like, okay, now that I've talked to Sarah Smith, like I know I'm not going to be a good fit for her program, and then still being sold to. And
Hmm.
then beyond that, feeling like they're not a good fit, being sold to, and then eventually signing up because the salesperson is so good at closing the sale that they're able to just like turn off the fact that their brain is shouting at them, like, no, 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 this isn't what you need. And they're like, here's my money.
Yeah,
It's awful.
yeah.
But again, like that all ties into, I think, our original point of like, what is the coach's intention? If my intention is to just get as rich as possible, I don't care if you're a good fit for my program or not. I just want your money.
100%. One of the things I do is I work with my clients month to month. And I do that on purpose because what if after a month I get tired of you, you get tired of me? Or what if all you needed was 3 sessions and you're good to go and you come back 2 months from now? I think the other way of for their own the coach does it for their own financial gain of work with me for a year. Of course, 14K right there. He made his quota for the month. That's where like the icky stuff comes out for me. It's you're not doing it for the client when it's like that.
Yeah, I'm working on editing an interview right now that I did with a lawyer speaking about, things to look out for in coaching contracts and that sort of thing. And we were having this conversation about people that offer these year-long programs, but then require you to pay in full upfront before the service has even been rendered. And I find that approach so fascinating for a few different reasons, but like one, as a service provider myself, I wouldn't want my clients to all pay me at once at the beginning of the year because then it's like I got to be responsible for budgeting that
Mhm.
money out as the year goes on. And there's this joke in like the content creator space where when a brand like pays you before you film the video, you feel like you're working for free because the dopamine of like making the money has
Yes,
already hit, but I still have all my deliverables. So
100%. Actually, that's pretty smart. Not to get
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So I'm like, I would much prefer if my clients paid me on like a monthly schedule because
Yeah, yeah,
it's going to
you're
be
still you
really
keep the
hard.
motivation going.
Exactly.
Smart, Danielle, smart. I
But I
love
guess
that.
the idea for them is like, I would assume they know that a certain percentage of people aren't going to finish the program. Now they already have the money. There's probably a no refunds clause in the contract. So now I just get money and I don't even have to work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
The creativity that's out there in the scammy side is pretty, unfortunately, sad, but it's there.
yeah. And there's no like end or seemingly shortage of new people coming into the into the space.
Yes, when a 21-year-old who hasn't worked a day in the work corporate life says, "I'll help you with your career coaching," I'm like, "Really? When was the last time you were in a corporate world at a
Yeah.
frontline manager role?" I don't know, like, it's just weird.
I'm
And you're
curious
how
if
old?
you see that a lot just because with I know a lot of people my age, younger than me even, yeah, like mid-20s have a lot of success on apps like TikTok because they're good at making short form content. So now all of a sudden I'm a coach in whatever, careers, ADHD, blah 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 blah. I have all my videos go viral. Now I'm flooded with clients, but I'm not qualified to be doing this. Like, is this something that you're noticing a lot in your space specifically or not really?
Um, I see a bit of a common theme on the ones that gain that celebrities and that influencer thing a little too fast. The common theme is they burn out. It's
Yeah.
coming at them fast and furious. There's too many things. All of a sudden, they have speaking engagements, podcast interviews, this and that. Yeah, okay, it worked, but now you got to keep up with the fame. And then comes new content of, "Whoa, I burned out.
Yeah.
Here's how I'm getting through it."
Now I'm a burnout coach.
Thank you. No lack of creativity there. Like, I'll give him that. But also for me, though, you know what it is, Danielle? I'm going to be a little woo for a second here, but I think this kind of woo is appropriate. Like attracts like. If you're coming in, woes me, that vulnerable shares and this and that, you're going to get those kind of clients,
Mhm.
right? For me, if you go to my website, read the things I say, it would actually make you want to be like, either she's not my coach, because I can come across as pretty, like, let's get to it, or like, wow, this is the person, this is my personality, this is who I want to work with. And I intentionally market that way to make sure I get the ones that are matching my kind of energy level and my way of thinking. So if you're coming in, woes me, life is hard, all of this stuff. Yes, I totally, with compassion and empathy, I have space for you. But also then we need to move forward. And if you want to be stuck in the woes me, then it's definitely therapy work. It's definitely getting through some of the healing that needs to happen.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that, and I think that that's something I see as well, is like and I think that's important just from, like, a marketing perspective, is making it very clear, like, who you are for and who you are not for. And
Mhm.
if your messaging really appeals to those people that are gonna be in that sort of "woe is me" mindset, you have to be prepared as the provider of, like, how much work that's gonna take. And I
Yeah.
think that's something when you don't have experience, you don't understand.
Yeah, there's a comment in here I want to
Mhm.
touch on. New grads get hired at McKinsey, Deloitte, KPMG, business consulting. Very late with six figure, likely no. So here's the thing. I used to work for Deloitte. We would hire new grads. However, we would surround those new grads with mentors, with coaches internally, and nurture them. So they're coming in with the theory of the application of consulting and all this stuff they learned in university, but then it's no fun in there. It's they're working hard and they've got, the mentors, all of that supervision. None of this online wild wild west. I'm 21 and my YouTube channel is 3 million people, so I'm going to coach you through your business. So there is a time and a place and who you surround yourself with where that would kind of make sense versus some of this stuff that I see where the person is doing it without ever having any super, like, I cannot imagine, Danielle, me coaching and have never had worked with a mentor to talk through some of my client cases that I had. Man, I had some interesting stuff. I was like, oh my God, do I keep them as a client? What do I do with them? So I don't know how these coaches do it without supervision, without mentoring and all of that to get through their experience or to build on their coaching skills. Because it does get pretty lonely, right? Like it's a lonely business running your own business.
Yeah, I think I have a bit of a different perspective on that just
Mm,
because and this is in like this subsect of coaching that I spend a lot of my time in is I think that that can get misconstrued very quickly where it's like you're not going to be an effective coach and you're not going to succeed as a coach if you don't have a mentor, which I don't believe is true. I think even in my business, I don't have a mentor, but I have a community of other people who are also
that,
business owners.
there you go.
So I just wanted to make that point of like, I don't think you need like a paid mentor, but if you have people that you can get that feedback from, that is integral to your success because
100%. I
I,
call them your board of brains. You've got a
yeah,
community that supports you, that Danielle is not doing this on her own.
exactly. And I
In
can be
part,
like,
that
okay, I
spirit
have
is the
this
ones.
idea. Is
There
it
you go.
stupid? Tell me.
100%. 100%. Like
Uh,
I so appreciate that because you're brainstorming. You've got your network. The ones that are siloed and just like I'm doing this and nobody else come into my realm because of competition, because of this and that. You know, that scarcity mindset of oh, I shouldn't tell anybody else what I'm doing. Let me just do it by myself.
Exactly. Or you end up in these like what I see a lot is and I mean we've mapped out the pyramid here on
Oh,
the
I know. I
channel.
watched that.
Yeah, so you get whatever, let's call her Sarah at the top and Jane's underneath her and Jenny's underneath her.
Yes.
They're in an echo chamber. Like they
Yes.
all have a mentor, but they're all saying the same stuff and believing the same narrative and pushing it on each other. So it's like in that context, it can get you have to be aware, I guess, of like who you're taking your information from and actively be looking for alternative perspectives. Like I'm always asking people from like my small business friends, my
So good.
partner who works in the tech space, like
So good.
people everywhere to try and get a more like holistic view of what's going on here.
Love that.
Julie says, "I'm coming in late to coach you about being timely." We love it.
Love it. Welcome, Julie.
So good. I know there was a question that came through on Reddit before we got started.
Hmm.
This is like kind of changing gears a little bit,
Yeah.
but someone was asking if you had guidance on how to actually properly get diagnosed with ADHD.
Ooh. Um, do not go to TikTok.
Yeah, Google it. Take a quiz.
And God, that whole TikTok diagnosed me is like, ew. So I would say, and this is a sensitive topic because the wait list to get appropriately diagnosed, depending on what country you're in, it can be pretty nuts. UK, I think it's now like 3 to 4 years waiting list. I can't remember the last time. Canada, I think. Well, there's some new clinics that are coming in, giving a faster turnaround, a few months. Um, so I do appreciate the length of time that it will take for your diagnosis to happen. However, I beg of you to do get your diagnosis because your ADHD does not come by itself. And it's super duper important. Yeah, Australia, 2 years. It's super important for you to know your brain wiring. And also here's my thing on it. It's even though you get your diagnosis, some of this could be subjective. I first was diagnosed with mild depression at 35, right? But because I was doing all things not knowing I had ADHD. So then when my ADHD diagnosis came in, oh, my depression now made sense because that was flaring up because I hadn't managed my ADHD effectively or learned about my brain. So there is complexity around it. So I appreciate when you want to self-diagnose and be like, I look through Instagram and through I'm autistic. And then oh my God, and then I'm also a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Before you know it, you've got all the labels. So please, I beg of you, do get professional diagnosis just for that reason. Because if you're sitting on that neurodiversity umbrella, there's so many things could be going on. You may have had a car accident where you had major concussion. All of a sudden, you're showing ADHD symptoms. That's a just in time kind of a symptomatic thing that's going on. And it wasn't all of your life, those symptoms. So, again, makes a difference. So, really, the message is that get professionally diagnosed through any of the centers that are available to you in your country, in your city, And unfortunately, if there's a wait it out, because the other side of it, that knowing of what it is, what's your brain wiring doing truly, then you can find the right specialist that you can work with. Sometimes it's an occupational therapist, sometimes it is a therapist, sometimes it's a coach. So bring in the support as you need to, one at a time, one at a time. Go through your reinvention, I call it, because it is truly, once you get the aha, this is how my brain works, then the clarity comes, and life can get a little easier, I would say. But it's, you got to do the work a little bit. Did that answer you?
Yeah, I think so. And so, like, you would typically start with your, like, GP, right? Or if you
Yeah,
have one, I guess?
yeah. And some of the general practitioners will refer out if they don't have, not all of them have the skills. Luckily for me, mine did. She actually specializes on ADHD. This is her personal thing that she did. So she knew the telltale signs. And that's as far as I went with her. Do I want to get further diagnosis eventually, the extensive kind? Maybe. But at this time, what she gave me and my previous diagnosis of depression, I've got what I need for now.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, like, so, like, ADHD, at least in Canada, because I've looked into it, ADHD is an easier diagnosis to get than something like autism, because that one you actually have to pay out of pocket for if you're an adult. At least in BC you do. And
Mm.
it's quite expensive. So I think, like, starting with your family doctor or NP, whoever you have, is
And, and,
probably.
and and can I say just a little bit on that? And sorry, we may be going off tangent, but it is important. Sometimes those with autism may first get diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
And then they're like, wait, this isn't ADHD, this is actually autism. So, depending on your doctor, not all of them know the nuances. So, if in your heart of heart, you're like, this is still autism, there's things that I'm noticing, please advocate for yourself, get the further evaluation. You will thank yourself for doing the hard work. Because I've had clients where they're like, wow, actually, it's autism first and then ADHD.
Yeah.
And then knowing that, then they can put in the right protocols that addresses the primary thing and then the secondary thing.
For sure. And I just want to bring attention to this comment here. So Marie says, look at the self-diagnosis thing is a good way to start figuring out your own brain and finding strategies in waiting for an official diagnosis. I just want to
Beautiful.
make the point that we're not saying, like, self-diagnosis is invalid or anything like that. It's
Mm-mm.
definitely a good way to kind of make that initial understanding that something might be going on. We're just recommending that it's important to go through the process if it's available to you. And I understand, especially for people in the US, that might not be the case. Healthcare isn't exactly accessible. So there is validity in both. It just might make it easier for you as the individual
Hmm.
to go through the process if it's available.
Yeah. I like that other comment that just came in. People don't do need to be aware that there's executive. Yeah. Sometimes it could be just that executive functioning at the time and a place. Some mothers may go through that brain fog with their first baby. Does it mean they have ADHD? Maybe not. Maybe they're just experiencing brain fog for a while, and that's just the way it is for a bit. So it does get complicated, Danielle, and that's the part
Hmm.
for me as a coach. It takes a lot of responsibility for me to make sure that I'm supporting them at the right place at the right time, so that these things are we're just not, hi, I'll coach you anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that that's really important. And that's something that I admire in the way that you approach it is you really seem to have conviction in understanding where those boundaries are of, like, this is what I need from you as the client in order for me to be able to effectively deliver
100%.
the services. And I think that many people in the industry tend to overlook that or
Yeah.
maybe not take that into consideration and just think, I can help anyone with anything because I know even the things I don't know.
Oh, that just gives me chills, even if you're just acting it out.
I'll just read a book. You know what? If you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I will be Googling it on session.
Danielle, maybe at one point I will actually email you a link to coaching versus therapy. ICF has a nice document about it that talks about when do you refer out for coaches.
Mhm.
It has a document for us to hear the telltale signs to know when you need to not be working with a client and refer out. And I think maybe if we could put it in your comments afterwards in your description for people to kind of look at that document from ICF
Yeah, for sure.
with the nuances, just even for themselves of, oh, this is what I'm going through right now. I guess it's therapy
Definitely.
versus,
I'm also in the middle of working on a deep dive. I've interviewed a number of different coaches and practicing therapists. So that will be coming soon. But in the interim, I will share that for sure if you want to send it over to
awesome.
me.
Well done.
If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll hang out for a few more minutes and just see if anything comes through, or if there's anything else that you want to share specifically, Cathy, the floor is yours.
Hmm. What do I want to share? So let me recap that thou shalt trust your spidey senses when it comes to you're in a conversation with a coach and it just doesn't feel right and there's a lot of red flags and a lot of promises. As coaches, actually one of the things properly trained coaches, we do not guarantee results. We do not promise you that certain things that you're coming in is going to go away. And the minute you hear those words, you run, you say thank you so much for your time and you walk away because it's not about the promises. It doesn't work like that. Um, the other thing is please do check the credentialing of the coach. Even if they're in the middle of coach training, what institute are they getting their coach? Because some of them are like, hey, I'm a new coach, I'm starting, I'm just getting ahead on my content sharing, right? So, fine, if you're a new coach doing this, but tell us where you're getting your training from so that you can see where the training is coming from a reputable source.
Hmm.
You can Google that. You can, there's ICF has a whole list of, so ICF, if you go there, there's a whole list of credentialed institutes. Did they go through one of those? And ICF, oh my God, they put these institutes through hell and back to give them the credentialing, truly. So even if the school that they went through is listed on there, go for it. Like there's rigorous training that they're getting through. What else? What else?
Someone's asking if you have any recommendations for specific books on ADHD.
Yes, my favorite go-to book is Your Brain is Not Broken. The way Dr. Rosier writes her book is just like butter. It just flows nicely, and she's also a coach, and a lot of good stuff. The other one is Divergent Minds. I'm looking at my bookshelf. Divergent Minds is another good book that I highly recommend. Very well researched book. It's not like one of those, oh, regurgitation of you Google. Anything actually, Dr. Russell Barkley here on YouTube, he has his own channel. He's retired now, but he still pumps out content. It's amazing. Dr. Barkley is one of like the leading experts on ADHD, and he does research all the time in there. So those are
Okay, I'm
some of the areas.
pulling up his channel. I'll put it in the chat. Other question was, is there a time when you need both a therapist and a coach at the same time, in your opinion?
Yeah, I have clients that do that actually, that they're doing some of the deeper work with a therapist. For example, people pleasing is a common thing in the ADHD coach community. I'm a people pleaser. I always say yes. And some of it can be deeply rooted into childhood trauma, whatever happened in the past. So sometimes when that people pleasing gets in the way and we're not able to, and it keeps coming up, like we're session 3 and we're not moving forward. This is a therapy conversation to heal some of the wounds of the past. So I have clients that'll meet with their therapists, come back to coaching, and we kind of do this dance back and forth. So the deeper stuff, and actually it works when you and your coach talk about it and you're like, oh, this is a good one for therapists. Like they're even pinpointing the piece that works for them. And then you even have a better therapy session because you actually have a topic that you want to dive into. And you're just
Exactly.
not, you know, talking about everything.
Yeah,
So
I think it
yes,
can work like in reverse for both of you. Like having the therapist helps you as work with your coach, having your coach helps you work with your therapist.
yep, yep. Very much so.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Cathy, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun, and I hope that everyone in the chat here had some good takeaways. I'm just making sure I didn't miss any questions or comments. This one says, I'm going to mention differentiating complex trauma versus ADHD. That was a huge issue with my most recent burnout and shutdown. Yeah, and again, I think that's what in my opinion, really the importance of working with a professional is being able to navigate that, because when we refer to someone called them internet experts earlier, I think
Mhm.
there's harm that can be done in that place of, people who don't actually know what they're talking about advising you on certain things. And especially when it comes to the mental health space, it can be quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, Monica here is asking, how do you avoid contradictions between the therapist and the coach? So as the coach, I guess.
Oof.
Client dependent.
I know. I was gonna be like, I don't have one particular answer for that because it's truly it depends on the client and what resonates with them.
Yeah, and I guess that kinda answers the second question too, because she's asking, like, how are you in the same vibe as the therapist? But I guess it would depend on the client's ability to decipher that, of, like, find the same way you, like, find a therapist that's a good fit for you, you'd find a coach that's a good fit for you. So it's not necessarily that the 2 of those individuals meld so much as they match you as the client. I would think anyway.
Yeah, and if my red flag would be like, hey, if you do coaching with me, your depression is gonna go away and you won't need to see your therapist anymore. And if you say that to your therapist is going to be like, I don't think so, right? So things like that where it's like actually you're stepping over your boundaries as a coach.
And it would work
Or
in therapy too if the therapist is like, "Fire your coach, you don't need them, I'm the boss."
that's it. Or I've had therapists that say, "Well, you're so successful, why do you need an ADHD coach?" Where it's like, actually, do you know what a properly trained ADHD coach does? Some of them don't truly. It's still, even though we've been doing coaching for the last 20 plus years, ADHD coaching, some therapists are like, "Oh, I didn't know that was a thing. You guys do that?" So that side of the industry also is still we're trying to catch up and be like, "Hi, we're here." It is one
Yeah,
effective method.
exactly, and I think that, unfortunately, a lot of that just comes from, like, the mess of crap that's out there on the internet. I know
100%.
with therapists that I've spoken with, that's a lot of the concern just comes from, like, underqualified, uneducated people cosplaying as the knowers of everything that really compromise the integrity of the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Which, you can say that for any industry, right? It's just
100%.
buyer beware, no, trust your gut. If it feels weird, you go. And the one thing I would say, when you're looking for a coach, any kind of coach, please, please interview a few. Just don't go with one that you think, okay, that was it. Even if you found the right one, still, I think we owe it to ourselves, interview a couple more just to see what it's like. What are they thinking? What is their, because then you may come back to your original one with more conviction of your decision, or you may be like, oh, actually, this one, the approach makes more sense. So it's okay to shop around. You have
Play
that.
the field.
Honestly, there's so much out there anyway. So,
For sure. No, that's a super important point to
yeah.
make, and I admire you for maintaining such strong integrity in an industry where I feel like it would be relatively easy to just say, "Screw it. I'm gonna do whatever makes me the most money," you know?
Honestly, yes, and also to my peers that are in the same wavelength of thinking as me, there's more of us out there. It's just
You guys are a lot quieter.
that's it. That's it. We don't like, blast it out at the rooftops of hi, we're here. So do your research, go through ICF if you're looking for a coach. That would be like my first place. Get the credentialed ones, interview a few. They've been around. And they're also paying to keep their credentialing going. So they're keeping a standard of operation. And I have so much respect for those peers of mine that keep going at it, keep coming back at it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it, and I
This
have
was
your
fun.
information linked in the description, so if anyone wants to check out Kathy's channel, you can do that, and, yeah, any questions they have followed up, I'll just connect with you
Yeah.
after the fact. Cool.
Thank you, Danielle. This
All
was
right.
so awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for all that you do. Honestly, your channel is such a gift. Don't
Thank
ever
you so
stop.
much.
Keep going.
Yeah. Everyone remember to give the stream a thumbs up, head over to Cathy's channel, do the same, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.